You say the price of my love's not a price that you're willing to pay. Why so sad? Remember we made an arrangement when you went away. Now you're making me mad. Remember, despite our estrangement, I'm your man. You'll be back, soon you'll see. You'll remember you belong to me. You'll be back, time will tell. You remember that I served you well. Oceans rise, empires fall. We have seen each other through it all. And when push comes to shove, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. Da 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 da. You say our love is draining and you can't go on. You'll be the one complaining when I am gone. And now don't change the subject, 'cause you're my favorite subject, my sweet submissive subject, my loyal royal subject, forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. You'll be back like before. I will fight the fight and win the war for your love, for your praise, and I'll love you till my dying days. When you're gone, I'll go mad, so don't throw away this thing we had. 'Cause when push comes to shove, I will kill your friends and family to remind you of my love. Da 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 da. Everybody.
Yeah, excellent. Why am I playing this music instead of the regular music? Is because the pastor that I'm critiquing today is Pastor, what's his name? Erwin McManus. And a subscriber of mine wanted me to critique this one because she was given this video from a believer, I think. And he, I believe, is in Hollywood or Los Angeles area. And my guess is he has a lot of audience members who are artsy. I don't say that in a derogatory way. I didn't say fartsy. I said artsy. And they might appreciate that this kind of music as an intro. Plus, I want to say that for a lot of people, the idea of a deity, idea of God looking down and loving you is very comforting and gives them hope, meaning, and purpose, helps lower their anxieties. But I'm here to tell you, and through this critique, that if you're going to choose a God, don't choose the one out of the Bible. In fact, probably don't choose any God of any religion on this planet. If you want to become some type of deist and think, there's some divine purpose, you have my blessing. Honestly, you do. I don't think there's any reason to believe that, but I very rarely push back on deism. I think depending on which way the wind blows, you'll either fall into atheism or general theism, I guess. Well, I don't know. But if you can stay in deism, fine. All the more power to you. Okay, so let's get into this and see what this. I've watched this once before at 2x. I made some notes. I don't know if I'll use them, but we'll see what he has to say.
Or are they all the same in the end? Another person wrote in, is God in...
Oh, okay. So I got to set this up. He has people asking questions, wrote in and asked them questions. I thought it would be fun if I actually tried. He didn't answer any of them, except for one, which is about this sermon message he's about to give. But I'm just going to, for fun, answer as much as I can in like 10 seconds or less.
And second, why are all religions created differently? A larger narrative today. So we're going to journey together in a meandering sort of way through.
Oh, Pine Points. Slightly odd guy. Yes, you are slightly odd, and 1,000 Pine Points for you being here first. Shell, Ranch Elder, second and third.
A number of questions, trying to get somewhere together. Questions that came this morning. They had a friend who was an atheist who had these two questions, and they thought the idea of life surface questions was a great idea. They said, what happens when you die?
Probably nothing. But if you're a Christian, depending what type of Christian you are, you'll go to either heaven or hell. And if some Christians think nobody goes to hell, everybody eventually ends up in heaven. But even then, you'll have tremendous suffering. If you're a Muslim, same thing, paradise or hell. If you're a Hindu, it's maybe you die and then you're reincarnated. In some versions of it, your goal is to not be reincarnated. Those are the biggies.
And second, why are all religions created differently?
Yeah, because of different cultures, geographical regions.
Or are they all the same in the end?
They have some similarities, but each religion has something unique. So whenever you say, my religion's the only religion that says X, you can say that about any religion.
Another person wrote in, is God and Jesus one and the same?
Depending on what Christian you ask, I would say 80% of Christians do say God and Jesus are one and the same, which is the reason why I played that opening clip from Hamilton to show that if Jesus is God, God is Jesus, and Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, if you believe it's at all history, he's very much like King George III.
Why worship Jesus specifically instead of God himself?
That's a great question. Well, it doesn't make, from most Christians' perspective, especially evangelicals, it doesn't make a difference because God and Jesus are the same people.
Another asked, why are there so many religions in the world?
Because there's so many different cultures in the world.
I used to feel that all the religions were basically specific cultures' ways of personifying the lessons of God as translated by their way of life. But as I learn more about Jesus and Christianity, this question grows. How do we reconcile the creation accounts in the Bible with evolution?
Just watch Hugh Ross. Yeah, he's the go-to guy. He can make anything fit into evolution. Although I don't think he accepts common descent. Maybe watch. I don't know. It's actually really. biologos.org. If you're a Christian who wants to try to reconcile the creation account with evolution, watch BioLogos, and basically here's the bottom line: it's mostly just fictional storytelling in the first few chapters of Genesis.
A definite scientific discovery. Also, aliens. Please elaborate.
Aliens, yeah, they're probably out there. Who knows? Maybe not. But we're so far apart, we might not ever make contact.
I love the way they signed off. I want to believe. And I'm not sure if they want to believe in aliens, in creation, or evolution, but they want to believe. Another asked, where did God come from? This is a great question.
Oh, that's not a great question. If you're a Christian, anyhow, God has always existed, eternally in the past. But it's still a little confusing because if God's a personal God, then he at least has thoughts, and thoughts I would think is sequential. But if they're not sequential, then it's like, what is the mind of God like if he's a personal God? It's just like it's all, every thought he's ever had, it happens at once. Does he change his mind at all? It seems like as soon as he made creation, he sure did.
Where did God come from?
Always existed. And if something like a God can always exist, why can't something like material always exist?
What is God's origin story? I hope you're prepared to be disappointed. We are kind of thrust into this story where God created the universe, but we didn't get the story of where he came from. Please help.
It is an interesting question. Like, does God ask the question, why do I exist? If God's a personal God and thinks thoughts, is God, and if we're created in the image of God, and if we say, oh, where did we come from, then maybe God asks the same question.
Yeah, I'd like help too, okay? And how can I truly know that God is real? It's such a broad question, but there are so many religions and gods, and while I do have what I consider to be spiritual experiences, how can I be so sure that those are attributed to a God and not just coincidence, or the human mind's need for cosmic belonging, or hormones?
That's a great question. How do you know that what you think is God talking to you, interacting with you in your life, how do you know that's just not in your head? Well, here's a good test. You can just ask God to light a water-soaked napkin, light it up in fire. And if he does it every time he's asked, there's a pretty strong evidence that this God exists.
Could be all of those. They go on to say, I often hear you talk about God speaking to you or to others, and I haven't experienced that yet. Synchronicity and coincidence just aren't proof for me. I hate to be that skeptic that demands proof, but I'm such a logical thinker, and I was raised by a scientific father, so that these are the questions that plague me.
Yeah, this is why I sometimes wonder if religion is based on personality types, and what type of theology you accept is based on personality types. If you tend to be more of an analytical thinker, even if you're a believer, does that impact what theologies you accept? I really do think that is the case. And I bet you there's a lot of Christians sitting in pews where they look over at their spouse who might be more analytical than them, and they can just sense that their spouse is not buying it. And then vice versa. It's like when the music starts playing and the emotions are overflowing, some people just suck it all in and will believe anything what they're told after that because of those great emotions that make them feel good.
Another writes, I don't understand the logic behind Jesus died for our sins. How and why does it grant us, as the current humanity, the grace of God? Why punish Jesus, God himself, for humanity's sins?
Well, because sin has to be atoned for. Heaven is a pure place. God does not allow any impurity. And so therefore, God has to punish, because God is a God of justice. He has to punish for all sins. And the way he thought it was the most efficient was to do it once and for all through a perfect sacrifice named Jesus. Or if you're a Jew, you could just say, well, all God requires is you to ask for forgiveness, repent, and you're done. You don't need to punish your son to accomplish that.
Now, this next one's really snarky, and so I thought I'd keep it. So, Erwin, I love how they address me personally, and so I'm assuming you're here. So, Erwin, if you were walking down the street with your kids, and someone jumped out of the alley with a gun and said, I'm going to shoot one of you, who's it going to be? My guess is that you'd say to the man, take me, shoot me, not my kids. What? They've lived a good life. He goes on to explain, but God didn't do that. He sacrificed his son. I don't get it.
You see what he's saying here? He's saying if God was a real man, he would have taken the bullet instead of saying, shoot my son. But, in Christian theology, they're the same person, which makes the meme of God sacrificed himself to himself so other people could escape what he would judge them for doing, which they were created in a sinful nature anyhow. Oh, it's just a big mess.
Interesting. A little bit of self-preservation there. And hello, Erwin, exclamation point. I know that you get tons of emails all throughout the day, but I wanted to reach out because my brother, who is an atheist, came with me to Mosaic this past Sunday. Wow. That was just so encouraging to me. And I want to thank you for inviting your brother. And if you're the brother, I want to thank you for coming and risking being here with us.
You know what's interesting about this? Why is that encouraging to him that atheists come to his church? Now, I'm going to appeal to a small minority of Christians right now. But isn't church for believers? Isn't church to edify fellow Christians? What business do atheists have coming into the sanctity of the church? Like if you want to have a missions field, like a day of the week where you're just, preaching the gospel, that's another thing. And having some type of fun with non-believers, build relationships, that's another thing. But church is for Christians, not for atheists, right?
Us. I spoke with him about his thoughts after hearing your message, and he said he was slightly disappointed. It's my goal. And I'm thinking this is a huge win. I mean, when was the last?
I like that about him, Erwin McManus. My goal is to be just slightly disappointing. So if there's any Christians here listening right now, my goal for you is it's all about expectations. Keep expectations low. So my goal is just for you to be slightly disappointed in me and not fully.
Last time as an atheist, you went to church and were only slightly disappointed. And but could have been greatly disappointed. And so I'm counting that as a win. It's a huge.
Yeah, good point. Who is it? This was Brennan Ho. This was May 7th, 2017, so don't think this is a COVID-packed auditorium. This is from 3 years ago.
And he said he was slightly disappointed because one of the biggest things that he struggles with about God is natural disasters. That things that are out of our control but completely in God's control. And frankly, I thought about answering or addressing that question last week when talking about human suffering, but my talk was already an hour long and I didn't want you not to come back this week, so I had to figure out what to leave out. I left that part out, and it had an effect on someone's life. So we're going to try to squeeze it into today's conversation. I love my brother dearly, and this is why. I love my brother dearly, and I know that he is searching for someone to be able to answer this question directly and detailed so that God can speak to him to help him understand. Wow.
Well, a question I have for Christians is, why do you want other people to become Christians? What is the real reason? What is the main reason? Think about that. If you had, there's probably several reasons, but if you had to pick one, what is the main reason you want your loved one to experience God or be a Christian? And be specific. Just don't say because it's awesome.
That for me feels overwhelming. That someone is searching and trying to make sense of life and of God. And he came and gave us an opportunity and left slightly disappointed. So I want to prepare you. You prepare for disappointment. You will be slightly disappointed. But I don't lose hope in that. I have this incredible confidence in the reality and wonder of God. That even if my answer is slightly disappointing, that the conversation will open up an entirely new world for you.
His sermon here is about 30 minutes, and I'm at 1.5x. And so it hopefully won't be too long.
Why I encourage you to involve other people in this conversation. It's not that we're going to be able to answer all the questions the way everyone needs them answered. Now, I can tell you that I consider slight disappointment a huge win for me. But I do know that God, in his wonder and in his love, will fill the gap between what I leave unsaid and what your soul needs to hear. So we dive in. Because all these questions really center around belief. Around why God? Why Jesus? Why the cross? Why this? And I want to take you back a little bit even to some of my own processing of how I've come to believe. Because I can tell you, I stand here somewhat amazed that I believe. I mean, for some people, belief comes easily. For other people, it's a genuine struggle. And there have been so many times I've actually stood on this platform astonished that I'm actually here advocating for God.
Yeah, I looked into his past a little bit, tried to find his testimony, didn't spend too much time on it. But what I did find was, I think he has cancer now. And even before then, he struggled greatly with anxieties. And you'll find, whether you're a Christian or non-Christian, there's many people who struggle with anxieties. But a lot of people do find relief from their anxieties through a belief in a God or in Christianity.
It's unexpected even for me. And even though talking about the journey of faith is always a retrospective, you don't really remember your journey once you've come to know God the way you experienced it before you came to know God. Things start attaching themselves to it. Because once you begin to see reality through the filter of God, it's impossible to go back and see it another way.
Yeah, I know exactly what he means. But the thing is, it also works in reverse. And the example I give is when you are a kid and you open your parents' closet door and you see the Christmas presents there, it's really hard to believe in Santa Claus after that. And once you've been in a religion, in Christianity, and what you thought was true, you become convinced that it isn't. It is really hard to put those Christian glasses back on and see the world that way.
But I do want to take you on this journey with me, and hopefully we'll begin with the broad questions that we heard and move all the way to the very specific questions. From how can we believe in God when there are natural disasters to why would God allow the disaster of the cross to take place?
Yeah, a good question on the live stream chat about the skinny jeans. But I will say, I don't know how old he is. He looks older than me, probably mid-50s here. And he looks like he's in good shape. But, you know, everybody in California is in great shape. And I think everybody in California, it's mandated that you have a slit right above the knee. You know what's funny? I have a 14-year-old son, and he has jeans just like that.
Well, if we just break it down in a simple framework, we have two options, I suppose. There is a God, and there's not
Hey, welcome, Misty. Okay, so now we're getting to the meat. We have God and no God.
a God. God and no God. And
One thing from the outset I want to say is, like, give the polytheists some credence here. Like, you at least put a bracket S behind God. Like, there could be many gods, right? That's a possibility. There could be gods that are not creator gods. There could be gods that are not omniscient. There could be gods that are not omnipotent. So I know what he's doing here, but from the Christian point of view, it's as simple as God or no God. But when you're looking at mankind, how they view these things, no, you just can't draw a line in the middle. Even zero God, you could say you still believe in immaterial stuff. You can be a Platonist. In fact, I don't know, can you believe in the supernatural without a deity? Maybe. So, but anyhow, we'll go with it. God or no God.
so many of the people I talk to nowadays have actually chosen a very, very specific position to say, I'm an atheist. I don't believe there is a God. Now, there are others who are scientific, but they would say they just don't know. They're atheists, or maybe they would say they're indifferent. But what I find is that many times a person who says there is no God has a more intense emotional relationship to the idea of God.
That's because you live in the United States of America and you're a pastor, and you probably deal with a lot of people who have left religion and who feel betrayed and bitter that they've been lied to, and so they have more passion against it. If you go in other places in the world, my first cousin has lived in, I think, 14 countries. Maybe it's not that much. But when you travel the world, you learn very quickly that most people would call themselves atheists, but just don't care. It's like you go to, you go to some place in South America and say, William Lane Craig. Who? Who's that? Edward Fazer. What? Who's that? It's like, no, they don't care.
Because it's very odd that a person would spend their life warring against something that does not exist.
They don't war against, some atheists do not war against something that doesn't exist. They're warring against people who want to inject God in the public sphere. That's the problem. And here's a very simple example. It's Sunday. You have a headache, but you go to the cabinet, you open the cabinet, and you're out of Tylenol, you're out of aspirin, nothing, but you got a headache. So you get in your car and you go to the store to buy some more Tylenol. But wouldn't you know it, you live in a small town in southern America, southern United States, and it's Sunday, so all the stores are closed because God rested on the seventh day. Well, actually, that would be Saturday. But anyhow, in the United States, they call Sunday as the day of rest. This is the problem. It's like so many people who don't believe in God, don't believe in Christianity, this is their frustration, that it's like it permeates through the public sphere and it affects them in sometimes very simple ways, like not being able to buy Tylenol on a Sunday, to what their kids learn in school, to how politicians behave and what policies are put forth.
And I don't mean to demean that. What I mean is that there's something profound and deep going on in the person who does not believe in God. So I'm not trying to demean that at all. What I'm actually saying is that it's more important, more significant, and it's more visceral than we perhaps perceive at first. And it plays out in the realm of intelligence and intellect and logic, but it's far more profound than that. And so if you just begin here and say, well, you can see the universe as created by God or see the universe as created outside of God, but I don't want us to get confused because what
Or you could see the universe, the cosmos, capital U for universe, the cosmos, is not being created at all. Isn't that an option?
happens a lot of times is people say there's no God, and so what you do is you put science there. You go, okay, the world view of no God, that's the world of science, and the world view of God, that's the world of faith.
Okay, whenever I hear a Christian use the word faith, I want to know what they mean by it, because sometimes Christians use the word faith as a verb, and then they mean trust. Other times they use it as a noun, which means just belief. And I'm quite sure he's using it as a noun, that faith is just a belief in something.
And so then we see science and faith in conflict with each other. But any thinking person who has a genuine faith knows that there is really no conflict between science and faith.
That depends, doesn't it? If science says X and your faith/belief says not X, then there is a conflict. There are many Christians who will say science says we evolved via common descent, and there are a small percentage of Christians who vehemently say, no, that is false. That is, God created the first man, the first woman. They are definitely in conflict with that version of Christianity.
That's actually not a real dilemma. The real conflict is not between science and faith. The dilemma, the conflict, is between superstition and philosophy. Because what science is really good at is answering most of the questions.
I'm curious what he means by superstition here, and if he's using it in a bad way or a good way. Because isn't a lot of what Christians believe in some sense superstition? I know the word superstition has a negative connotation, but does it have to? Maybe it does. I don't know. But is it superstition for professional athletes to give thanks to God after they score a touchdown or hit a home run or whatever? Is that superstitious to cross home plate and then look up and go, da, 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 da? And I think it is, because what I think is going on is certain people are so fearful of taking credit for anything they do because they truly believe that God could take it all away. They could blow it at a knee the next game. And so if I keep thanking God for it, maybe it's like rubbing a rabbit's foot and God will protect me the next time. And I think you don't even have to be a professional athlete for this. I think Christians are so superstitious, a lot of them, that they will pray before they take a big trip in their car. Lord, put a hedge of protection over this car, because they're superstitious. If they don't pray, maybe they'll get in a car accident because God didn't send his angels down to protect you. Isn't that the same thing as rubbing a rabbit's foot and or maybe you think, well, no, it's not the same as rubbing a rabbit's foot, because every time I do it, it works. So it's not a matter of luck.
Humans ask. Science really focuses on the how. How does everything happen? How does the universe work? How does gravity work? How does this atmosphere come to be? And around the word how, or the question of how, we can ask the questions like what, and where, and when. And whenever you're dealing with these questions of how, what, where, when, those are scientific questions that you can actually study and observe and determine. But once you move into the other human questions of who and why, you move out of science.
Okay, so he's saying that who and why you move out of science, and what, how, where, when you move into science. Okay, when exactly did Jesus die? How did he rise from the dead? How was the big stone rolled away? What were the exact names of the 500 people who saw him? I think, and even the who and the why questions can be scientific. Like if your child asks you, why does our car go forwards when you press that pedal at the bottom, the gas pedal? Why does that work? That's still a scientific type question, but I think I know what he's getting at.
And you move into philosophy. Because once you start asking the question of who and why from a perspective that there's no God, from a scientific perspective, you've moved out of science into philosophy, which is perfectly fine. I have a philosophy degree. That's my background. I love the study of philosophy. It's a
Can someone look up where he got his philosophy degree from? Where?
study of wisdom. But what we need to realize is that the questions of who and why are not questions that can really be adequately addressed by science. It doesn't mean they can be adequately addressed by faith, by the way. It just means that they don't belong over here. They belong over here. These are the questions that drive us. What I think is interesting is that human beings seem to be more predisposed to ask who and why than what, how, when, and where.
Yeah, so many times in forensics, the answer to who is done through DNA analysis.
Well, one of the questions that was asked, of course, connected to all this, is how in the world can we actually believe in creation as opposed to evolution? What I think is interesting is that evolution really lends itself toward these questions of how, when, where, and what. Like, what ate him? What time? Where did it come from? How did you get away? All right?
So this is what I think is happening. He, I think, is in Los Angeles, and this looks more like a, I don't know, middle class, upper middle class type audience. And I would think most of his audience accepts evolution, and so he probably has gotten the idea that, you know, some people are struggling to accept Christianity because, well, if we view the Bible as a reliable source of history, it's obviously not, at least in Genesis. So what do we do with this?
When does it eat? These are evolutionary questions of survival. The questions of who and why are not even good evolutionary questions. And if you have had children, you know that children should actually be asking how and not why. See, at 2 years old, you would give anything to have your little child going, how do I determine when I'm about to have a bowel movement? How can I learn to hold it until I run to the potty and train myself? Wouldn't it be great if your kids all asked the right questions?
He studied philosophy at Elon University, says Joshua Howard. Thank you.
But they don't ask that. They don't ask the questions that are so important. Well, when should I go to sleep so it's healthiest for me? Where's the mop so I can clean the house? They don't ask those kinds of questions. What can I do to be a positive contributor to the family? They don't ask that. Who's cooking me dinner? That's a really big question. And when they're 2, they ask the question, why? 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 At 2, they don't need to know why. They're not answering any deep philosophical questions. Their life is not on the line because they don't understand the big why. But you will not have your kids drive you insane by going, how? 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 They don't ask you, how does this car run? They don't ask you, how does this work? They don't ask you, how did you make your money? They ask you, why? Why?
Why is he spending so much time on this? I think it's because he wants to show that there's something innate in human beings to want to know answers to big questions. And when you want to know answers to big questions, it's easy to put God as the answer.
Why? Why? And you'll try to answer that question 1,000 times because when you have a first child, you're so patient. You think that the why is so inquisitive, it's so darling, until they just keep asking, why? Why do I have to go to bed? Why does it have to be 9 o'clock? Why do I need to sleep? Why would it make me tired in the morning? Why are you doing that? Ordinary question. It's actually the why that drives everything about being human. And so we have a conflict that can be between superstition and philosophy because, by the way, truth does not belong to science. Truth belongs to us all. Truth belongs to everyone who's willing to pursue it. And sometimes science finds the truth and sometimes faith does.
Sometimes science finds the truth and sometimes faith does. What are some examples of when faith finds the truth? Is it in Mormonism? Is it in Islam? Is it in Christianity? And if it's in Christianity, that means it's not in Mormonism or Islam, correct? How can we figure out the truth of Christianity? See, this is the problem. I think when I was a Christian, it bothered me that there was nothing solid. Like, I believed in God, I believed in prayer, I believed in miracles could happen, but it seemed like a lot of the verses that I read really didn't work. Like, where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, there I will be also. Whatever you pray in my name, it will be done for you. You will do greater things than I have done. Ask and it shall be given, seek and you shall find. You know, sometimes it worked, but most of the time it didn't. And it is like, I think most humans, when they get up in the morning and they start their car, they want it to start 100 out of 100 times, or at least 99 out of 100 times. But with Christianity, it seems like that car only starts maybe 15, maybe 20 times out of 100. And this starts to weigh on the Christian. And so when it comes to figuring out what is true, I think science does a way better job as a method than faith does.
And sometimes we all betray it. But a part of the power of faith is its pursuit of the truth. And we need to learn to distinguish between the two. So I have to go back and go, okay, I either can believe there is no God or there is a God, and it will shape the way I see reality. And one of the things that I came to realize is that that there is no God doesn't really explain for me my best understanding of what it is to be human. And I love Occam's razor that says that the simplest answer is usually the one that's right.
He loves Occam's razor. The simplest answer is the one that's usually right. Well, what can be more simple than saying that something material, maybe not in our definition of material, but something material has always existed, some type of energy has always existed that created our reality, our universe, and that over 13.5 billion years, we eventually got here. Rather than saying, adding a new layer of stuff, remember, Occam's razor, let's keep it simple, stupid. Rather than adding on, well, yeah, we got the universe, but we need something else to explain all the things we don't know. Isn't it more reasonable to say that something material has always existed than posit a new something, a new category of something called the supernatural that explains things? So if you agree with Occam's razor, you should be a naturalist, I think.
So I just want to lay out to you why I think it's actually more logical to believe in God than it is to not believe in God. Because one of the questions is how can I believe in God? I was raised to be logical. I was raised by a scientific father. And I want you to realize that believing in God is no less logical than not believing in God. And not believing in God is no more logical than believing in God. And I know how we do it because I just, disclaimer.
Yeah, it's no more or no less logical. It depends. It depends on how you're defining God. And some attributes of God can be viewed as contradictory, all merciful, all just. That, in some situations, cannot both exist at the same time in the same situation. So, it could be the case that, oh no, believing in this version of God is completely illogical. It's like a married bachelor.
I know there are really dumb people who believe in God. I don't mean uneducated, I just mean dumb. People go, I wish they didn't say that. You ever heard people talk about God and you're embarrassed because you belong to that team? You're like, oh, man.
I think that happens more in theism than it does in atheism. I think more times do Christians say, oh, just shut up already. Like you got Christians who listen to Kent Hovind or Ken Ham and said, just shut up already. Oh, you're embarrassing all Christians. You got these Christian flat earthers. Oh, just please shut up. You're making us look bad. Now, that probably does happen within atheism as well, but I think it's more of sort of like the more kind-hearted atheists saying to the more mean-spirited atheists who lose their temper and and start screaming at Christians or theists, just shut up already. Just part of the best thing about being an atheist is you don't have to talk to theists.
And in that moment, not me, I'm tapping out. So I'm just saying, there are a lot of people who talk about God, and I just think, wow, that's just really dumb. And I feel embarrassed. I'm dumb by association. And usually it's in contrast to a really intelligent person who does not believe in God. They're like, yep, that's the problem. Super smart people over here don't believe in God. Super dumb people do believe in God. What do I do? So let's not talk about anything that requires intelligence. Let's just keep it in the category of faith.
I'm not going to get into whether you're more likely to be an atheist if you're smarter, more intelligent. I tend to lean against that because there are countless examples of people becoming a Christian, leaving Christianity, going back to Christianity, and does their intelligence go boom, 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 boom every time that happens? I don't think so. But there is a correlation between the belief in a God and higher education. I think that's a strong correlation.
I have great news for you. There are dumb people who believe there is no God. I don't know, it's just reassuring. But there are also really smart people who believe there is a God. And so this is a part of the dilemma, is that intelligence doesn't seem to be the pathway to leading to a sure conclusion.
He's right here. This is so curious. You can be highly, highly intelligent, and you can be a Christian, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Scientologist, you can be a Mormon, or you can be an atheist or a naturalist. What is going on here? You can be a person who knows the evidence better than anybody else and reject Christianity. You can be a person who knows the evidence better than anyone else and accept Christianity. What is going on?
But when you don't believe there is a God, and Stephen Hawking would agree with this, you have a certain view of the universe, that the universe is determined, that the universe is about cause, and that the universe is mathematical.
That reminds me, I think that's William Lane Craig's new apologetic, is that because the universe is mathematical, that proves God. Now he's using it the other way around.
And so there's also certain implications of that, which means that there is no free will, that free will is an illusion, that there is no creative act, and that there's nothing spiritual.
Is that true? Now, it depends, I guess, how you define free will and creativity. I'll let him keep talking here.
That the whole universe is material. And so when I look at that, I go, okay, that's one view of reality. Over here, what we're told is that there is a God. Then the universe is not mathematical. The universe is relational.
The universe is not mathematical, it's relational instead. Even if there is a God, even if Christianity is true, can it not be both? The universe is mathematical and relational. Hey, Joshua White, thank you for the donation. Are Christians embarrassed by Hovind? Some definitely are. The ones I encounter seem to prefer disassociating. He isn't a real Christian, or he doesn't understand the word. I think, like guys like Inspiring Philosophy, I don't think he would go so far to say that Kent Hovind is not a real Christian, or Ken Ham is not a real Christian. I think guys like Inspiring Philosophy would just say these guys are brainwashed and stupid and maybe hucksters a little bit, trying to get money from a certain demographic of people. But whether or not they really have the Holy Spirit and are saved, he probably wouldn't go that far.
And that if there is a creator, and he created us in his image and likeness, then there is creativity. There is free will.
Yeah, see, this doesn't follow. Just because there's a God doesn't guarantee that there's creativity and free will. Now, even if you're thinking about the Christian God, there are what's called hyper-Calvinists, even not so hyper-Calvinists, who would say, no, free will in the strict definition, there is none. God decrees everything. And so you don't have free will. So it depends what version of Christianity.
And there is choice that affects the future. Now, frankly, sometimes you just have to make a decision that says, this makes more sense to me.
Frankly, you have to make a decision that makes more sense. If you care about this thing called truth, that is a terrible way. And I know we all do it. We all do it, humans, me included. So like, this resonates with me, this makes more sense with me. But I tell you, our intuitions can be so wrong at times. At times it can be very right as well. But what makes sense to you may not be the truth. Islam makes sense to people who grew up in an area surrounded by Muslims. Mormonism makes sense to people grown up in Utah. Scientology makes sense to people who have parents who are Scientologists. But I don't think this pastor for a second would say that these belief systems are true, but yet they make sense to them. How do you know you're not that person, Erwin McManus, that believes that has chosen to believe what makes sense, yet you're believing something false? Hey, thank you, Pam S., for their donation. Yay, I love this series. Thank you, Doug. You're very welcome.
I'm just going to be honest here. This makes more sense to me. A universe where there is creativity, where there's free will, where our choices create the future rather than a fatalistic, deterministic future makes more sense to me. Then this idea that
Notice he equated fatalism with determinism.
the universe is simply mathematical, that everything is already determined, that there is no creativity, no spirituality, no free will, because everything is just the result of cause and effect. So for me, I immediately move toward God. Then you have this issue of...
Okay, what is he really saying here? He's saying not only does it make more sense to me, but it's like I want my choices to be free in the ultimate sense. I want creativity. And if you're a person who's artistically minded and loves to create art and so forth, music, poetry, whatever, you want this to be something that's not just cause and effect. You want to create something out of nothing. In a sense, you want to be God, right? Small g, God. And so this resonates with you, and this makes you feel good and important and special.
Well, what about creation? So I'm going to just step back just for a second, because some of the questions were like, how can you believe in creation and not in evolution? I don't even know how that's still a question today. To be honest with you, I'm so embarrassed. And I know there's a reason for that. It's because sometimes we actually think we believe what the Bible teaches, but we didn't stop to read the Bible. And I'm going to say this, I know it's going to be disturbing.
See, the thing is, I agree with him on this point, that it's silly to read Genesis and to think this is actually the truth. Genesis 1 and 2 and 3. But there are so many Christians out there who do believe that this is true. What are they missing? Why can't they see this as just figurative? It's because they value the text. It is special to them. And I think for pastors like Erwin McManus, the same applies. He just chooses different passages which is special to him. So even if I think he gets into Genesis 1 here.
To some of you, but the Bible does not teach that the universe was created in 6 days. It does not teach that. But we taught that.
It definitely says that. I might not teach it, but it definitely says. This is that whole thing. Well, that's what the Bible says, but that's not what it means.
And so many people actually believe that. You see, a thinking person who's a scientist, who's trying to understand how everything comes together, hears that we say that everything was created in 6 days, and we think that 6 24-hour days, they think we're out of our minds. And I know people that I respect, that I may even be related to, who believe that everything's created in 6 days and 24 hours. And I'm saying that that is absolutely possible, but it's not biblical. That's a
Not biblical.
different thing. See, I checked it this morning. I asked Siri just to confirm. And Siri explained to me that a day is the time it takes for the Earth, for one rotation of Earth in relationship to the sun. That's a day. So it's 24 hours, more or less, here. But if you go to Scandinavia, it takes 6 months for day to become night.
So he asked Siri what a day was, and it said 24 hours, which includes day and night. He's using day as like brightness outside, and he's saying a day is 6 months. No, a day is still 24 hours. It's just when you're on the North Pole or South Pole, depending on what season it is, the sun doesn't set.
So even on this planet, in this time of history, 24 hours.
Which, by the way, is the proof that the Earth is a globe and not flat. So I still have a bet, I think, $10,000 bet with a flat earther. We go to Antarctica during their summer, and we put up a pole, and we just sit there. And if the pole's shadow makes more than like a 300 degree, just to be safe, more than a 300 degree revolution about the pole, he owes me $10,000. I don't think, he didn't take me up on the offer though.
This is not a consistent reality. There are places where you have day and then night. Years ago when we went to Sweden, we were there for a week and we never saw a second of night. And so when we talk about 724, we have such an ethnocentric, culture-centric view of the Bible.
Okay, so what do you accept out of Genesis, Erwin McManus? Do you accept that God made the first man and first woman? Or do you accept that through a long, laborious process, humans evolved into Homo sapiens around 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 years ago? Do you accept that Eve was created from Adam's rib? that there even was a literal Adam and Eve, or is you just toss that out? Do you accept that there was the first act of sin at a certain place in history from Homo sapiens, and that caused sin to enter the world, to humans, to cause the fall? Or do you reject that? And if you reject this stuff, then how in the heck do you make sense of verses like, through one man sin entered the world, and by one man it is atoned for, as I think it says in Romans? How do you deal with these? And if you were to get in a time machine and talk to Jesus himself and ask him, how old's the earth? I asked this question of Hugh Ross, and he says, well, Jesus would have said 13.8 billion years, 4.5 billion years old for the earth and 13.8 for the universe. He said that's what Jesus would say. But come on, really? I think if Jesus were asked in the first century, how old is our planet? He probably would even think the earth was flat, by the way. Jesus was probably a flat earther. Jesus would have said, I think he would answer this way. Well, what do the scriptures say? In the morning and in the evening was the first day and the second day, and then God rested on the seventh day. Jesus would have quoted scripture. He would quote Genesis as answering a factual question, I think, and you seem to be throwing it out, Erwin McManus.
Even if we live today, we could say, well, it's at least 6 months. But on top of that, there's another dilemma. It's just a small detail that makes things a little bit confusing. The sun was not created until day 4.
Okay, remember earlier he said that science and faith, don't have to be two separate things. But if you are someone of faith who believes that this is how God created, there's absolutely no way that they can be reconciled unless you just reject it. You have to reject one or the other.
So you cannot have a day where the earth rotates one time in relation to the sun when there's no sun to relate to. And by the way, a year is the earth revolving around the sun, which cannot happen until there is a sun. So you can't revolve around the sun if the sun isn't around.
Yeah, he's right. I think according to Genesis 1, the earth was created before the sun, and we know through science it's the other way around.
So people start counting history even when the scriptures leave it in mystery. Saying on day...
The scriptures leave it in mystery? Whoa. Is he saying that this is a mystery or that it's just false?
Day 4, the sun is created. Time doesn't even begin to be a factor until day 4. That's almost all the way through creation.
I think he's saying it's just Genesis 1 is false. Don't call it a mystery. Just say it's not accurate history. And it's probably not meant to be accurate history.
And then we don't even exist till day 6. And God...
It depends. In Genesis 1, yes. In Genesis 2, I think it's day 1, day 2.
God isn't limited by time. He didn't need time. We are the ones who live in this construct called time. So actually time didn't even begin until the 6th day. But we start adding it up as if everything is superimposed by what we experience now. So I want to be really, really clear. Up to day 4 could have lasted 1 trillion years. Because to God, a day is like 1,000 years. It could have...
He's saying this because his Hollywood audience will not buy into Christianity if he says, no, we have to accept Genesis 1 as a historical account. They'll just walk away. So he has to say this in order to keep people in the fold.
Taken millions of years for the first 4 movements to take place. And it would be completely accurate in relationship to the Bible. And then we act like it's 24 hours once Adam and Eve are there. And of course, God rested on the 7th day for a full 24 hours.
So does he believe in a literal Adam and Eve? So he rejects the earth, the sun, the sequence of that, but accepts Adam and Eve?
That 7th day could have lasted thousands of years. That day of rest, it might have been a description of what life was like on this planet when the relationship with God was good.
So you can tell he believes in original sin, but then how can you believe that there was a time when the planet was in harmony with God and still believe in evolution? Evolution is basically, was it 90% of every species that's ever existed on this planet went extinct through death and killing and destruction, and the dinosaurs went out, what was it, 150 million years ago when a big asteroid hit into the Gulf of Mexico. Is this during those thousands of years of peace on the seventh day?
I think it lasted more than a day. And by the way we read it, there's Adam and Eve, then there's Abel and Cain. And then Cain killed
It sure sounds like he believes that these were real people.
his brother Abel, so half the world's population was killed. Boom. And we get really confused because when Cain kills his brother Abel, there are not supposed to be any more people on earth. And Cain says to God, if you drive me out, everybody's going to want to kill me. Who's everybody? He starts going out from cities. Where do they come from? How is it even possible that all this evolved with no time? And it's funny the way we project on the story. There's the sixth day, God creates us. The seventh day, we rested. And on the eighth day, we blew it.
See, I really think he believes that these characters in Genesis actually existed in history. And so he's trying to balance evolution with some fragments of the Bible and trying to put it together somehow.
We act like we didn't even enjoy God's creation for 5 minutes before we blew it all up. It doesn't even occur to us that thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years could have existed, could have happened, could have passed before the story of Abel and Cain. See, I don't think Abel and Cain is a story of Adam and Eve's first children. I think it's a story of humanity's self-destructive nature, and that they had many, many children before that. It's the only way you can explain that the earth was already populated. So I'm just going to go here and just say for a moment, please don't reject God because we're dumb. Because we can't distinguish between superstition and faith. Because we believe more what we've been told than what we actually can read.
Yeah, you hear this from so many Christian apologists. Like, don't leave Christianity just because you're convinced it's either evolution or God or common descent or creationism. No, you can adapt your Christianity. You can mold your Christianity into a version that can harmonize the two things so you can still keep your hope, meaning, and purpose.
What the scriptures tell us is that God created everything, and this is important because the evolution talks about process. And I think it's exciting to study process. I think it was exactly right for Darwin to study process.
Yeah, if evolution's process, let's keep things in perspective here. That process took how long? Remember, if you're a Christian like Erwin McManus, you believe that God created everything. Would you expect a loving God whose whole purpose is to create humans to glorify him? Would you expect that to take 4.6 billion years on planet Earth and 13.8 for our universe? Would you expect God to use the method of evolution via common descent to do that? Really laborious, painful, death. Would picture a loving creator that's human, someone who's the most loving person you know, who creates things with his hands or her hands. Would they use death and destruction to create something beautiful? See, this is the problem, I think, Christians who accept common descent, who try to keep people in the fold so they don't run away from creationism, the 7-day thing. This is the problem they face. They still have to ask themselves, is this what I would expect from an all-powerful, all-loving God of how he would create? For me, that expectation is not there at all. I wouldn't. In fact, if the flat earthers are right, if the creationists, if Ken Ham is right, as far as their model of how things were created and what the earth looks like and so forth, it's a no-brainer. I'd have to become a theist. I would have to believe in a God because that's right in line with my expectations. It's like, boom, create, boom, humans, boom, start loving me. As you know, I'm speaking for God. Start loving me now because I created you now. Oh, you goofed up. Okay, I got to kill you all through the flood or some of you and start again. Okay, love me now. Oh, you disappoint me. Okay, I forgive you. Love me again. It's like...
But creation talks about purpose. Why we're created. And so the creation is about intention. Why are we here? See, if God created the universe, then there is intention. But if God did not create the universe, then there is randomness.
Not necessarily true. There could be a God that exists who is the deistic God who just wound up the clock, created everything, and said, okay, guys, have fun. I'm going out to lunch for 1 trillion years. He is assuming that the God of the Bible is true, and assuming that this God is personal, and assuming this God has plans for everyone. And why is he assuming these things? Because it makes him feel special. It makes him feel like there's reasons why I'm alive and why bad things happen to me and why good things happen to me, and there's purpose in it, and wouldn't you know, God loves me.
And you know what's really odd? When we feel that life is random, something inside of us moves into chaos.
No.
See, we get angry with God when random things happen to us.
No, it's just the opposite. I was more angry as a Christian than I am now as an atheist, because here's why, and I think Christians will resonate with me on this. If you're a Christian and something bad happens to you, that you're praying for the opposite, and it can be the best thing in the world. A child is sick. Parents are mourning. They're praying to God that their child won't die. The child dies. Those are the moments where the anger hits eventually. Why, God? Why? Why did you allow this to happen? God, you have intention, you have purpose, you have meaning, but why did this have to happen to me after I prayed that it wouldn't? You've helped other people, God, but why haven't you helped me? The anger is from the Christians. An atheist, now I'll speak for myself, I expect bad things to happen because life shit happens. It just does. Because there is randomness in this world. There is chaos in this world. And so when bad things happen to me, it sucks, and I hope I have a community around me to help me through it, but I'm not going to blame God for this because I don't believe God exists. I don't have this expectation that good things are going to happen to me because there's a God out there. I think it's exactly the opposite of what Erwin McManus is saying. And I think once you leave Christianity, once you leave theism, specific theism, you actually can breathe easier in life. Now, you'll still go through tough times, but no matter if you're a theist or an atheist, what is really helping you through these tough times? Like pragmatically, what's helping you? It's not this God. You still have this belief. You might think it's a God helping you, but really practically it's human beings who come along you and give you a hug. It's human beings who give you a tissue when you're crying. It's not God.
That creates suffering. Why doesn't randomness feel natural to us? But intention is something we long for. So now to the question of creation, tsunamis, earthquakes, hurricanes. Let me address your slight disappointment. You see, I actually wanted to answer that question, or at least address it, because I think it's an important question as well. Because when we look at the universe, we somehow strangely draw conclusions about God. Isn't that odd? That we actually draw conclusions about God's character or even God's existence based on how the universe is operating.
I agree
Why
with
would we do that? Let's listen to what it says in Romans chapter 1, verse 20, and then Romans 8:18. It says, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. So what the scriptures are actually telling us is that the universe points to God.
Does the universe point to Jesus? Does that verse in Romans say that people are without excuse when it comes to accepting Jesus as their Savior, taking up their cross and following him? This is a question that I used to ask as a Christian, and it's a tough one because they would have to say no. They would have to say the universe points to God, but not necessarily to the specific incarnate God called Jesus.
You're exactly right.
Thank you.
That even natural disasters, if there is a God, should tell us something about who God is.
Okay, did you hear what he said? I'm going to slow it right down to 1x. Listen to what he says here.
Disasters, if there is a God, should tell us something about who God is.
Natural disasters tell us something about who God is. There were natural disasters before there were Homo sapiens. Why? God wants natural disasters on animals? God wants natural disasters on humans?
And so somehow the universe tells us about God. And I think it's interesting that a lot of people acknowledge
Because God could stop it, right?
that the universe has intention toward them, but they do not acknowledge the existence of God. But the universe would not have intention if God was not intentional. The universe would not have purpose if God were not purposeful. But listen to what it says here. It says the entire universe reveals God's qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, so that what is to be known about him can be completely understood by us. In fact, what the scriptures tell us is that if we stop and look at creation, we will be without excuse in our knowledge of God. This is the language of God.
Yeah, wouldn't one stop and look at creation and say, okay, we're without excuse that a God exists, but what is this God like? Couldn't one easily say this God's evil? Like, is that not a reasonable thing to say? Because he could have not created in this way. But there's good things on this planet as well. There's beautiful flowers, beautiful sunsets, walking along the beach. So maybe God is partly evil, partly destructive, and partly loving and partly beautiful. Maybe God is like, what religion is that Christianity was sort of based on in around 2000 or 1000 BC? The Babylonians, what religion was that? But basically they believed that God was kind of, and this is where the concept of Satan came from, I think.
And people ask me, why doesn't God speak in a simple language? Well, God's language is creation. In Romans 8, verses 18 to 23, it says, this is important, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. So he's talking about our...
Hey, thank you, Tony D. Thanks for entertaining me, Doug. Your voice is calming to me. Keep up the great work. Oh, well, you're very welcome.
Suffering. And I want you to see how he connects human suffering to natural disasters. This is really, I think, significant. It says, for the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. I'll explain that in a minute. We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time.
By the way, this passage in Romans is referring back to Genesis, I believe, which he kind of dismissed as anything historical.
Not only so, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship and redemption of our bodies. Now, okay, this is going to be kind of out there, but I want you to go with me. What the Bible actually teaches, what the scriptures teach us, is that one singular act can have massive effect and have ramifications that literally become cosmic.
Can you see what he just did? Now he's on the left side of the board, the God side, and he's saying one single effect can cause these, it looks like ripples in a stream, right? And then he has the word determinism on the right side where it says no God. But he's actually drawing a picture of determinism. You got a cause and effect to a new effect, a new effect, a new effect. So something happens 1,000 years ago can cause a result today. Sounds a little bit like determinism.
Now, I know this is crazy, that one act in Africa can affect the well-being of creation in Antarctica. See, I know this is absurd. It's almost like science fiction that our emissions could actually create a hole in the ozone. Because
part of me just can't help but say this. It's like he's appealing to the young environmentalists in the crowd and trying to get them see like Jesus loves the environment.
The Bible didn't know about quantum mechanics. The Bible didn't know about complexity theory. The Bible did not understand these things. This is way before. This is all a surprise to God. That a small choice here can have a cosmic effect. Have you ever noticed that?
But yet everything's free, right? Some of those cause and effects are from humans who are free to do otherwise. Wouldn't that break that chain of cause and effect that you drew on the board?
You don't really understand what's wrong with you until you see it played out in your relationships. Now, let's be honest. Have you ever anybody say to you, man, you are so arrogant? You go, what are you talking about? I'm awesome.
I can remember that line. Doug, you're so arrogant. What do you mean? I'm awesome. Love that.
You ever have people speak into your life and you just do not see it? What's wrong with them? See, you don't even know you have issues until those issues translate into human relationships. You don't understand you're selfish until your selfishness begins to affect the relationships in your life. You don't really even see you're greedy until it begins to have an effect on other people's lives. You don't actually know the content of what is in you until you see it translated into the world that's outside of you. And that's how you can know a person's healthy on the inside, is because they have healthy relationships on the outside. You can know what's happening in the universe inside of you because you're literally affecting the universe outside of you. And that's exactly what the scriptures say, but even on a more cosmic level, what the scriptures are telling us is that all creation is affected by our brokenness.
Yeah, see, he is explaining why natural disasters happen by using people. But if you believe in common descent and believe Homo sapiens have only been around for 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 years, and the Earth is what, 4.5 billion years old, no natural disasters before then? This doesn't make any sense to say that sure, some natural disasters could be caused by humans, but there are a boatload of natural disasters that no human could even if they wanted to, could cause or create. This is a problem.
That our souls are groaning for their redemption. Your soul knows there's something wrong with you. My soul knows there's something wrong with me. There's something broken in me. My soul knows that it needs a connection that is bigger than myself. And it's translated because I see it in everyday life. I see it in my relationships. I see it in my choices. I see it in the life I've lived. And I can actually see when I make choices that are related to God that I create a better world because there's a better me. And I create a more destructive world when there's a more destructive me. And what the scriptures are telling us is the entire universe is groaning for its redemption. That when we severed our relationship with God, that this literally created a seismic effect.
See, when we severed our relationship with God, what is he talking about? I think he's going back to Genesis, which he kind of poo-pooed earlier. Did humans sever their relationship with God at a certain point in time or not? Did it start with a couple, Adam and Eve, or not? This is like picking and choosing what you're going to believe out of the scriptures in order to, I guess, keep the most number of people in the fold or help the most number of people with their hope, meaning, purpose, feeling special.
And the entire universe is groaning now for its redemption as well. And the earthquakes and tsunamis and hurricanes are all the external expression in creation of the devastation of the universe within us.
Yeah, it's like he believes there was no hurricanes before people.
We can see this on a human level. We know there's something wrong with us because there's war and violence. We know there's something intrinsically wrong with us when you have poverty and greed at the same time. We somehow know that something is broken inside of us when there's betrayal, when there's deceit.
Chimpanzees know this too. Orangutans know this too. Bonobos know this too. They know that there's something wrong when a chimpanzee within the tribe kills an offspring, and then they sometimes kill that chimpanzee. There's justice within certain higher primates that are not humans.
But it has never occurred to us that our actions might actually affect creation. There are people who are even now going, human actions don't have any effect on the environment.
See, this is coming from the position that everything good that happens is because of God, and everything bad that happens is because of humans. This is where this all stems from. We cannot, for a second, as a Christian, blame God for anything. We cannot blame God for a tsunami that kills 100,000 people. We can't blame him for that. The reason why that tsunami exists is because it's a reflection of the groaning and the moaning from the brokenness within humans that happened probably during the time of Adam and Eve that caused everything to become a wreck. So don't blame God for that. Blame us.
But waters do not pollute themselves. And we live in a world where we can see our air, but we can't breathe it. And the choices we make actually affect the creation in which we live.
Okay, the title of this video is Why Jesus? And for the record, actually, let me double check. He has not mentioned Jesus' name once yet. I'm going to bring up the transcript. Control F, Jesus. Okay, I'm at 37:13. Oh, he mentions Jesus at 23, and you ask us the name of your son, Jesus. Oh, yeah, he did mention, but just in passing. Oh, okay, I'm wrong. He's mentioned it 3 times. Yeah, he's mentioned it 3 times, but it's not answering the question, why choose Jesus?
And what the scriptures tell us is that we would not even acknowledge the brokenness of our souls if we did not see the brokenness of creation. So when we ask the question, what happens when we die? See, even that question goes back to the why. This is not a science question. And really the answer is, who cares? If there is no God, who cares what happens to us when we die? But there's something strange about being human. Your body is in decay, but your soul longs to live.
Does a dog's soul long to live? Almost every mammal longs to live. Do they care about where they go when they die? See, we Homo sapiens, I think, have evolved to have beliefs of eternal life and so forth because it's a way to deal with death. It's as simple as that. It's a way to deal with our emotions. But it's also a way to lie to yourself, I believe. It's a way not to face reality straight on and say, look, we evolved in such a way that really anything over the age of 40 is bonus. We've evolved to raise a family, make sure that they become independent, self-sufficient, and so forth. But, after age 40 to 50, every day above ground's a good day. It's like it's icing on the cake after that point. Now, I know that sounds a little harsh, but it really helps to live your life in that way with that perspective, because your anxieties and your worries just go right down because you're lowering your expectations. And you can still have this feeling of specialness within your community. You can still love one another and help each other and still get all the good feelings of hope, meaning, and purpose that Erwin McManus is trying to tell everybody in this congregation, that you need to believe in God in order to have this. You can still have it without the belief in God. In fact, it can be even more meaningful.
And so we fight and we fight and we fight not to die because we're terrified of non-existence.
I'm not terrified of non-existence, not one bit. But I do understand that there's people on this planet who are, and I just don't get it. Erwin McManus did not exist 1,000 years ago. Was he terrified of non-existence 1,000 years ago? Of course not. Why? Because he didn't exist. I know my daughter is a little bit fearful of non-existence, and I said this to her. It's like, you're not going to fear non-existence after you die, because you'll be dead. You'll be fine when you're dead, because you'll be dead. There'll be no negative feelings when you're dead, because you're dead.
Why would we actually imagine something that is eternal? Even the idea of God. So,
because it helps us survive. Because some people need it. Some people will behave better when they're alone, but they think God's watching. And I think this is why religion evolved, to have that cosmic spectator, and this is going to offend some Christians, but in the sky looking down to make sure you do the right thing. And it's also, I give the example of my sister. Believing in a God, in some cases, does help people survive, like literally live longer. My sister had MS, was paralyzed, but she squeaked out another, I'd say 5 years, because she believed in God, she believed in miracles, and she believed that God could at any moment heal her. And so she waited. She put the feeding tube in, which extended her life 5 years. Now, if it were me, I would have been dead 5 years sooner. I'd say, I do not want to suffer. I do not want to deal with this pain. I don't want my kids to see me like this, which, believe me, this type of suffering takes a toll on your family. And I would have said, no, take me out of the ball game, coach. I'm done. And I would have a big party, tell my kids, any final last words, and say, you're going to be fine. Try not to miss me too much, but, think about me when you want to. And but I want you to remember me when I was strong and full of life and not melting away in misery. And this is what belief in Christianity, in some cases, please hear me, I'm not painting a broad brush, but there are a lot of Christians who cause misery on this planet because of their belief in God. But that being said, it does extend their lives.
He asked me the question, what's God's backstory? That's a great Hollywood question. Where did God come from? What's his story? And this could lead us to not believe in God, right? Because we don't know God's backstory. Where did God come from? When I was a kid, I would literally have migraines asking myself the question, where did God come from? And if you see that as a reason to not believe in God, I have really, really bad news for you. If you come to conclude there is no God because we don't have any backstory, because how can God always exist? Right? How can there be a being that wasn't created, that has always been? And what does that mean to always be? That's outside of our comprehension because we exist. We began.
Okay, he's starting to bore me a little bit, so I'm going to go to the part where he talks about what matters. And in Christianity, what matters is Jesus. He finally gets to Jesus at minute 42 in detail.
Both at times. In John chapter 6, Jesus had just been teaching, and he used a metaphor. He said, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you can have no part in me. And that didn't go well. It didn't go well. He sounded like a cannibal and made people nervous. He was talking to a lot of really literal, concrete people.
Ooh. See, I can tell what personality type he is. Because he's using the word literal, concrete as bad terms. You can tell he's more of the artistic, creative type.
On hearing this, many of the disciples said, this is a hard teaching. I love that. Who can accept it? Aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said to them, does this offend you? What if you see the Son of Man?
By the way, he just called, I think he just kind of did a backhanded slap to Roman Catholics who believe in the literal body and blood of Jesus during the communion.
Ascend to where he was before. The Spirit gives life. The flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you are spirit and they are life. Yet there are some of you who do not believe. For Jesus had known from the beginning which of them would not believe and which would betray him. And he went on to say, this is why I told you that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled him.
No one can, remember what he said earlier, that if you believe in God, then you can believe in free will? And then he reads a verse from John 6:65. He went on to say, this is why I told you, that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled them. Where's the free will in that? If you can't come to Jesus unless you're enabled, you've got the Holy Spirit on switch flipped, you're not free to come to Jesus unless that's been enabled. How free are you in Christianity, I wonder? If you're a person who values free will, maybe you should give Christianity, a second thought, because maybe you're not that free.
From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. Do you want to leave too? Do you? Jesus asked the 12. Simon Peter asked him, Lord, to whom shall we go? Only you have the words of eternal life. I think this interaction is one of the most significant ones in the scriptures, because one of the questions that comes out of this is, okay, if there is a God, and God is relational, and the universe is created by intention, and so the driving principle of the universe is love, as opposed to the universe being accidental, driven by mathematics, determined with no creativity, no free will. And what the scriptures tell us is that actually reality is spirit, which, by the way, matches more our understanding of the universe now, because the world without God said the reality was material. But I think this is antiquated mythology, because we saw the world as material when we thought that matter and energy were different. But now we know that matter is just energy, reorganizing itself through its own unique intelligence.
Whoa, that's that is something someone creative would say. What? And notice he points an arrow from material to spirit. Is he defining what a spirit is here?
But now we know that matter is just energy, reorganizing itself.
Matter reorganized itself, becomes spirit?
Through its own unique intelligence.
And is energy?
And so the same.
And all matter has unique intelligence? A piece of coal is matter. It has its own unique intelligence? Coal?
Reorganizing itself through its own unique intelligence. And so the same energy that's in a...
I guess he's saying that if you reorganize carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, you can get organisms that evolve into intelligence. I buy that, but why did he draw an arrow to spiritual?
rock is also in a gazelle. And the same energy that's in a river is in you. The same energy that's in the universe is in an infant.
I can tell you right now that there's a big swath of evangelical type Christians who feel highly uncomfortable with this type of talk because it sounds very new age-ish. Listen to this. Like, they won't like this.
Energy that's in a river is in you. The same energy that's in the universe is in an infant. And that should blow your mind and cause you to have great faith.
Yeah, there's a lot of Christians who would say, man, you might as well be one of those Native Americans who believes in the spirit gods that and prays to trees and so forth, the way you're talking.
And as we look at this, we have to then go ask the question, okay, if there's a God and he's intentional, relational, and the universe is spirit, then aren't all religions okay? Aren't they all the same? And I understand, I think the well-intentioned behind this. But I've never been a big fan of religion, and I've got myself in huge trouble because of my views of religion.
How many times have we heard this? That I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. I believe in Jesus. I believe in baptism. I believe in communion. I believe in prayer, and I believe in reading the Word of God in the Scriptures, but I'm not religious.
I've been misquoted so much in my life. And years ago, I was quoted as saying that the greatest enemy to the movement of Jesus was Christianity. I did say that. And I wrote it. But what I was actually saying is this, is that Christianity as a religion is no different than every other religion. You see, what religions tell us is that God is up here, and we have to find a way to get to God. Because we don't get to God because we think he's a good idea. Somehow the human spirit knows that where there is God, there is life. And we're trying to get to life. That's what we're trying to get to. And so we call life God. And we're trying to get to God because we want to live. And so there are different religions, whether it's Hinduism or Buddhism or Islam or Christianity, that give you steps to get to God. They give you practices, rituals. They tell you to pray 7 times or to go through different acts of penance or to pray different prayers. And the way we understand this about God is that it's just like this global cosmic smackdown. No, 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 no. So here we are, we're trying to get to God. It's like, no, not going to happen. I don't care how hard you try. And I've talked to my friends who are Muslim, and I said, you're a devout Muslim? They go, yes. And I said, will you be with Allah when you die? And he said, only Allah knows. So it's a tricky thing, because only Allah knows. When I talk to my friends who are Buddhists, they go, well, you know, the path to enlightenment is a very difficult path. And Americans think reincarnation is like a joyride. Oh, I get to come back as someone else.
You can tell that he desires certainty, and he desires easiness, because he's mentioned, you know, only Allah knows. He's saying that, he's poo-pooing that. No, I need to be certain that I know how to get to God.
You do not come back as Sean Connery. That's not the core tenets of Buddhism. Reincarnation is a punishment that you're trying to break free from, to move toward nothingness so that you can lose all your uniqueness. And every religion finds a way to get to God, whether it's Christianity or Catholicism or Islam or Buddhism or Hinduism, whatever it is. And so when people say, isn't Jesus just the same as all those other religions? The answer is no.
Yeah. My religion, my belief system is special. My belief system is unique. A Muslim, a Buddhist, a Hindu can say the exact same thing. A Mormon, Scientology, they all have unique aspects.
You don't have to choose to believe in Jesus, but I want you to separate him from religion, because the problem is that Jesus has been put into this sphere of religions of a way to get to God. But all these religions teach you how to get to life, how to get to God, how to get to enlightenment. But the message of Jesus is the exact opposite. He's not teaching us how we can get to God. He's teaching us how God got to us. And so as you're processing things...
Yeah, Judaism would beg to differ. Yahweh came down, didn't need Jesus for that. I think even Islam would beg to differ on that God, Allah, came down in the form of messengers. And wasn't Jesus, in a sense, a messenger as well?
Trying to make sense of this. You go, okay, Erwin, I can go with you to God, because I've had people tell me that. I've had friends go, okay, I came here, I didn't believe in God, but now I believe in God, but I'm having a hard time believing in Jesus. But I want you to know, if God exists and God is relational and God is intentional and God is love, then Jesus makes perfect sense. And
Yeah, isn't that ironic how it all makes sense? If you're a Christian listening, go back to the beginning of this live stream. And I quoted a boatload of verses from Jesus, especially near the end. And ask yourself, is Jesus loving with some of the things he said? Did he really come to give life to everyone? Did he come down to give life? Or did he also come down to give destruction?
God is the name I use when I talk about me searching for him. But Jesus is the name I use when I talk about God searching for me. I want you to realize is that when you use the name God, because people say, well, why can't I just pray to God, not to Jesus? Because when we talk about God, it's as if we're seeing the back of God's head. But when God turns around and makes eye contact with you, you'll know his name is Jesus. And just from a more like metaphysical understanding of God.
I've actually never heard that analogy made before. It's kind of interesting. The back of the head is God, Yahweh. The front of the head is Jesus. Interesting.
Well, how can God be like three persons? I think it's fascinating that the scriptures tell us that God is light. And we know that nothing can move at the speed of light. And when you think about God moving at the speed of light, and that all matter, think about this, all matter is energy slowing down. So if you want to understand it from a more like metaphysical perspective, Jesus is God slowing down to our speed. And when God takes on our speed, our meter, our frequency, he takes on flesh and blood.
Our frequency. This is like New Age language.
I'm so glad that God didn't want to move so fast. He was willing to leave us behind. I remember when Aaron was just a little boy and he was walking with me on some trip. And
I really can't listen to anymore. This is so... You look at this board, you can tell that... do they have a close-up of it? Not really. Oh, this board, marker board that he's drawing on, if that represents what goes on inside his brain, my goodness. Like, this is the opposite of linear thinking. This is the opposite of concrete thinking. This is like, I have all these thoughts and I got to somehow put them together, and it's just like a mess. Now, there's themes in there like love, intention, purpose. And you can tell that these themes that he's mentioning is what he values and what he needs. But my goodness, I just don't know what to make of it. And then he's flying from science to New Age type language to conservative Christianity type language when he talks about sin entering the world and the moaning of nature. It's like, I would not want to be inside his brain. Whoa, it's a downer. So, what's the takeaway? The takeaway is that you do not need a belief in Jesus to have hope, meaning, and purpose. You do need it for eternal hope, meaning, and purpose. And that a lot of the hope, meaning, and purpose that you do get in your life now comes from your fellow man, your fellow humans around you, whether you're a theist or not, or an atheist. It has to do with community. Yeah, maybe I should Actually, I hate to admit this, but I'm wearing skinny jeans right now. And I hate to admit this, but it has a slit above the right knee. Hey, thank you, Matt Metro. Cut you live. Have 5. I love it. I'll spend it at Applebee's. So I made this video for one person. And I hope that one person watches it. Because as a good shepherd, I care about my sheep. And when I see one sheep go astray, I try to reel the sheep back in. So I hope that one sheep doesn't become a goat. My apologies to Erwin McManus. He was scheduled to come on, but we ran out of time. See you next time, guys.